Welcome back to our walk through the Word. I pray that God has blessed you this past week and you are ready to get into the study. We're looking now in the Gospel of Matthew again. We are now in chapter number 7. And Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through verse number 6, talking about criticizing and judging people. Judge not that ye be not judged. For with what judgment ye judge, ye shall be judged. And with what measure ye meet, ye shall be measured to you again. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, Let me pull out the mote out of thine own eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine. Let them trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you. Judge not that ye be not judged. Whenever we judge people, we are putting ourselves in the place of God. It's first of all an erroneous view of God, because judgment, we never have enough information to judge a person. Whenever you look at me from this angle, you always see the front of me and you never see what's behind me. For instance, to judge means that you have all the facts, you have all the information. I can only see what's going on in front of me, because if I turn to see what's going on behind me, I leave unseen what I was previously looking at. Only God has all the information. Only God knows the beginning from the end. Only God is able to render a proper judgment, because only God sees the whole picture of everything. One of the things that is frightening about God, and when I say frightening, I mean it causes me to have a reverential fear of God, is not only does God know everything, and not only can God do everything, but God can see everything. He's omniscient. He knows everything. He's omnipresent. He's everywhere at the same time. God can see all the angles. We see past, present, and future. But God is eternal now. And as eternal now, there is no past or no present or future with God. Everything with God is right now. You judge a person and you look at their past, but that's what they were. If you look at what's going to happen to them, that's what God can have them to become. Everybody that God used in Scripture, they were one thing when God found them, and then something else after God saved them. Like Peter was Simon before Jesus named him Peter. He was Simon, but Peter saw in him a rock-like character, a rock-like personality. So Petra, Peter, he became Peter because Jesus saw something in him. The Apostle Paul was Saul before he became Paul. Abraham was Abram before he became Abraham, because God always sees what we can become rather than what we are. So when you judge a person, you have an erroneous view of God, because you think God sees the way that you and I see. You and I see, Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, we know in part and we prophesy in part. We are only privy to partial information. There's a whole lot that goes into making a person who he or she is. And for us to render a judgment on them is to put ourselves in the place of God. That's always a dangerous place to be, because again, you are not privy to everything that has made that person who he or she has become. So in verse 1, there's an erroneous view of God. Judge not that you be not judged. And then in verse 2, there's an erroneous view of others. For with what judgment ye judge, you shall be judged. And with what measure you meet, it shall be measured to you again. The scripture says, if you judge somebody, the same measurement that you use to judge them, that measurement will be used to judge you. Whenever you get the urge to judge other people or to make an assessment of who or what somebody else is, the danger is you're always using the wrong measuring tool. You're always using the wrong yardstick. If you want to see how tall you are, you can stand next to me. If you've never sinned, or if you've never told a lie, or if you've never colored outside the lines, or if you've never gone out of bounds, stand next to me and you will always be taller than I am, because I, and as well as anyone else, has faults and failures and fractures and fissures in our personality. And so the proper measurement of judgment is to stand up next to Christ. And when you stand up next to Christ, you will see that none of us measures up. All of us fall short. The scripture says all have sinned and have fallen short of the glory of God. I think I mentioned it in another study that if there is a measuring line or a rope or a bar that you ought to jump to, and the bar is 50 feet high, if I jump 40 feet and you jump 46 feet, neither of us have reached the bar because the bar is 50 feet. So none of us will ever measure up. That's why Jesus had to come down, because we could never measure up. And so when you judge others, be careful the measurement that you use, because when you look at a person, you need to walk a mile in his or her shoes. You need to see whether or not some things have happened in their lives to determine where they are right now. Because where they are right now may not be where they're going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. The people who are at the top, all it takes is 24 hours for those people to come to the bottom. Many people have judged people by what they have failed to do, and we have climbed in our minds the ladder of success only to reach the top and realize that it's leaning against the wrong building. We're running after things that are not going to last that long. We are trying to measure ourselves by what kind of car we drive, or what kind of house we live in, or what kind of educational level we have attained, or what is our financial level of attainment or achievement. Those things are false measurements because we use them worldly. That's the worldly standard of measurement. But God has another standard of measurement that he gives us in Psalm number 1. Blessed is the man that walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And in that law doth he meditate both day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that brings forth fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper. That's God's standard of measurement. Then in verses 3 through 5a, he talks about an erroneous view of ourselves. Verse 1 is an erroneous view of God. Verse 2 is an erroneous view of others. But verses 3 through 5a is an erroneous view of ourselves. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considereth not the beam that is in thine own eye? Or how wilt thou say to thy brother, let me pull out the mote out of thine eye, and behold, a beam is in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, first cast out the beam out of thine own eye. That word mote and a beam in the eye, a mote is talking about a little splinter, a little speck that's in somebody else's eye. It's a picture of a splinter in one person's eye, but you have a 2x4 in your eye. How can you judge somebody who has a splinter in their eye and you have a 2x4 in your eye? In other words, you are judging somebody by a standard that you can't measure up to yourself. You're looking at somebody's weight, or you're looking at somebody's finances, or you're looking at somebody's character or somebody's behavior. And you are guilty of, or if you're not guilty of it now, you have been guilty in the past of the same thing. And so you are judging that person by calling them out and embarrassing them and making small of them because there's a splinter in their eye. You can see everybody else's sin, but you can't see your own. You can see everybody else's faults, but you can't see your own. You can see everybody else's problem. You got an answer for everybody else's situation. You have a solution for everybody else's problem, but you have your own problem. It's just like a person who's an alcoholic. An alcoholic, a person who's drunk, will never admit that they're drunk, or they'll never admit that they have a problem. They're always pointing out somebody else's faults. And there are people like that at the church. There are people like that perhaps in your circle of friends, or people like that in your concentric circle, who's always pointing out somebody else's fault, always blaming other people, or always looking for a way to put something on somebody else. The scripture says, why are you looking at the splinter in my eye and you're not considering the beam that's in your own eye? Jesus calls that person a hypocrite. A hypocrite is somebody who is play acting, who wears a mask, who is, and that would be apropos for what we do now when we come to church. We put masks on because of COVID-19. But behind that mask is another mask for a hypocrite. A hypocrite is somebody who pretends to be something that he's not. It's play acting. You see everybody clapping, so you clap. Or you see everybody standing up and you stand up. Or you will be with somebody and be one way, and then behind that person's back, you're another way. That's hypocrisy. Jesus is calling out people who are always pointing out other people's faults, and they have faults of their own. That's being a hypocrite. First, cast out the beam out of your own eye. I think the Williams brothers, this quartet group, says, sweep around your own front door before you try to sweep around mine. And then there's a right balance that we ought to strike when it comes to this matter of criticizing and judging people. In verses 5b through verse 6, and then shalt thou see clearly to cast out the mote out of thy brother's eye. Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast ye your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet, and turn again and rend you. The book of Proverbs says that wisdom is wasted on a fool. That's what Jesus is talking about when he's saying you're throwing your pearls to swine. People who are not ready to change, or people who are not ready to be converted, or not ready to come to Christ, and you try to use godly wisdom on them, those people will be just like swine who will turn against you and trample you under their feet. He says, don't give what's holy unto the dogs. He's not calling people a dog. That's what they used to call Gentiles. Jesus is using the language of the Jewish people. They would call anybody who was not a Jew a dog. Gentiles were called dogs. They were not in the family of the Jewish people. And Jesus said, don't give holy things to people who are not ready to accept holy things. While they are in their hypocrisy, while they are in their fault-finding mode, while they are in their sinful mode, Jesus said, don't give your pearls to swine. He says for us to not be unequally yoked with an unbeliever. That's giving pearls to swine. You're trying to hand out godly counsel and godly advice, and you're hanging around with people who are beneath the level that God has called you for. I was talking to someone today about the movie The Lion King, that cartoon, The Lion King, Disney's The Lion King. And in The Lion King, you remember that Simba left the Pride Land because Scar lied to him and told him that he had killed Mufasa. And Simba winds up in this place with a meerkat and a warthog. And he ends up eating worms and grubs. And he sees Mufasa. Rafiki, the monkey, comes and shows him Mufasa. And Mufasa says to him that you are more than what you have become. You are a king, but you are hanging around here with these subjects of yours, with a meerkat and a warthog. Likewise, that movie has some real strong biblical lessons in it. God has called you to greater things. God has called you to soar like an eagle, and here you are picking in the yard with chickens or flying around with crows. Birds of a feather flock together. And if you are not that kind of person, you are throwing your pearls to swine. You are trying to get something out of a person that's not in them. The only thing that can help people to change is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you and I have been called to be proclaimers of that gospel, ambassadors of that gospel. We are not to judge because we don't have all the facts. We are not to look at a splinter in somebody else's eye and don't consider the 2x4 that's in our own eye. He says, get yourself straight first. He told that to Peter. He said, when you are converted, strengthen your brother. Satan desires to have you that he might sift you as wheat. But when you are converted, when you get the mote out of your own eye, then you'll be able to get the splinter out of your brother's eye. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Thank you so much for joining us for this time in the Word. Look forward to seeing you again on next week. God bless you.